What's up, guys? I'm here with Will and Robinson. We're here for the meetup game. We're about to get inside. Let's go.
Shortly after sitting down, I pick up pocket tens from under the gun. I raise to 10. I get called by low jack, button, and big blind. We go 4 ways to a flop of ace, 3, 7, 2 diamonds. Not the best flop, not the worst. Big blind checks to me, and thinking that my hand is probably good here, I fire a c-bet of 25, and everybody folds. The very next shuffle, action folds to the cutoff, who opens to 12. It folds to me in the big blind, and I look down at a very playable 10-8 suited. I make the call. We go heads up to a flop of 3, queen, 8, 2 diamonds. I check and float to the cutoff, who c-bets for 20, and I stick around. The turn comes the king of hearts, which is really not ideal. I check with the intention of giving up, but my opponent checks back. The river comes the 3 of spades. I'm trying to think if there's any value in betting at this point, and I think the answer is no. I'm probably only getting called by a hand that beats me, and I can sometimes induce a bluff from a missed draw by checking. I check, my opponent checks back, and my pair of 8s is good. After playing these 2 hands early on in the session, I go card dead for a bit. We join the action about an hour later for some 5-2 bomb pot action. 8 of us see a flop of queen 10 deuce 2 diamonds on top, 9 queen 6 2 hearts on bottom, and I have ace ace king queen 4 in middle position. I have aces and the nut straight draw on top, aces and the nut flush draw on bottom. Small blind is going to lead for 19, the big blind calls, under the gun calls, I call, and the hijack calls. 5 ways to the turn, which comes a 5 on top and a 7 on bottom. I pick up an additional gut shot straight draw on top, and not much changes on bottom. Small blind fires again for a very small bet of 20, big blind calls, under gun calls, I call, and the hijack calls. Still 5 ways to the river, which comes a 3 on top and a jack on bottom. I river the second nut straight on top, and I end up with just a pair of aces on bottom. Action checks to me. I do lose to 4-6, but I have a 4. There's a 6 on the board, so I decide to go for value and bet 100, and the hijack player is the only one to make the call. We're going heads up to showdown, and the hijack shows ace 4 for the same straight on top, and my pair of aces is good on bottom, so I'm going to quarter my opponent and win a nice pot in the process. In this one, we're playing another 5-2 bomb pot. Top comes 7-4-6 rainbow, and bottom comes ace 10-6 2 clubs. I'm in the small blind with ace 7-6 4-3. I flop top 2 and a gut shot straight draw on top, 2 pair and a 7 high flush draw on bottom. It's important to note that my draws probably won't be good if they hit, so really I'm focusing on my 2 pairs, which in this game acts as a draw to a full house. Action is going to check to the under the gun player, who bets 20, middle position calls, low jack calls, button calls, I make the call, and the big blind folds. 5 ways to the turn, which comes an 8 on top and a 3 on bottom. I pick up a gut shot straight draw and an additional full house draw on bottom. This time, action checks around. The river comes a 9 on top and a 10 on bottom, counterfeiting my 2 pair. Action is going to once again check around, and surprisingly, my 2 pair on bottom is going to be good. I chop with the undergun player, who flopped the straight on top with 8-5. After these 2 bomb pots, it's back to card dead city for me. About an hour and a half later, we get into this hand where Robinson limps from the low jack, the hijack calls, cutoff calls, and the button calls before I look down at king deuce offsuit in the small blind. I guess I'm going to try and see a flop and complete. Big blind checks their option. We go 6 ways to a flop. Of 10, king, king, rainbow, I flop trips. Being first to act, I'm going to start with the check. Checks around to the button, who bets 2. I'm going to just call for now. Big blind calls, and the rest of the table folds. The turn comes a queen of clubs, which completes a straight draw and puts a flush draw on the board. Looking back on this hand, I should probably be looking to get value from a hand like jack 10 or queen jack, but in my head, I was worrying of value cutting myself against another king since I'm basically holding the worst king. So I end up checking, and action checks around. The river comes. The 10 of spades give me a full house. It's time to make up for lost value. Let's try a target of 10. I bet 10. Big blind folds, but the button calls. I show my king, and my opponent does show the 10 of diamonds. I definitely think I misplayed the hand on the turn, but in this case, it looks like I probably got max value, so glad it ended up working out. Still card dead. About 45 minutes later, I get in this hand where the undergun player limps, folds to me in the low jack, and I look down at pocket kings. I raise to 15, action folds back to under the gun, who makes the call. Quick note on this player, we've been playing for a little over 3 hours, and I'm not exaggerating, they have only folded once pre-flop. They've either limped, raised, or called a raised to see every flop, and while generally that's not going to be a very profitable strategy, they're actually running over the table. So we go heads up to the flop, which comes deuce 5-10 2 spades. They check, I c-bet for 20, and they make the call. The turn comes the queen of spades, completing the flush draw, and on this card, they lead for 50. Another quick note, they've generally only been leading out with some pretty strong holdings, so I'm not really loving this spot, but holding the king of spades, I make the call. The river comes the 10 of hearts pairing the board, and my opponent pretty quickly checks. They're definitely not checking a full house, and I'm pretty sure they would bet with a flush. So, thinking that my kings are good, I want to try and target a queen. I bet 75, and they pretty quickly fold what I think was 6-4 offsuit for a missed gutshot straight draw. Another 45 minutes later, we're coming up on the end of the meetup game, and I haven't really found many spots to get involved, so when I look down at king 10 suited and under the gun 1 with the under gun straddle to 5, I raise it up to 25. Action folds to my opponent from the previous hand who, you've guessed it, makes the call, and the under the gun straddler comes along as well. We go 3 ways to a flop of 8-10 deuce all spades, on which the small blind is going to lead for 30. The big blind folds, and with top pair, I make the call. The turn comes, the 9 of spades, which the small blind doesn't seem to love as they quickly check. It's really hard putting this opponent on a range because, well, they're seeing the flop with literally any 2 cards. But I decide to kind of turn my top pair into a bluff and try to get a fold from hands like 2 pair or any hands containing a small spade. Looking back, I don't think it's a very good play, and it's made even worse by my sizing as I fire for 55 bucks, which my opponent snap calls. The river comes a queen, and once again the small blind pretty quickly checks. After my opponent snap called the turn, I don't think they're going to find a lot of folds on this river. I wave the white flag and give up, and good thing I did, as they flip over the good old jack 4 of spades for the flop flush. Nice. I was in for 300, ran that up to over 500 despite being card dead, but after that last hand I end up cashing out for 380, booking a small profit of 80 bucks. A win's a win though, I'll take it. I had a great time hanging out with Will, Robinson, and the players who showed up. Special shout out to Ronnie and Nick. We'll most likely be having other meetup games in the near future, so if you'd like to know when that'll happen, you can follow me on Instagram. Thank you so much for watching, good luck at the tables, and I'll catch you in the next one.